Lying in a hospital bed, Sonny Kyle Livingston says the Tishomingo County Sheriff's Department knew Horace Hubbard of Burnsville was planning to kill Livingston and his companion, Buddy Hall. The Montgomery bail bondsman says while waiting for another friend to return with sheriff's deputies, the three men snuck around behind them and opened fire. Buddy Hall was critically wounded. He died 3.5 hours later at the Tishomingo County Hospital. Livingston is back in a Montgomery hospital undergoing tests to determine the extent of damage from the .30-30 blast he received from the shootout. Livingston, Hall, and the third man, A.C. Chapman, went to Northeast Mississippi to find Horace Hubbard and his son, Michael. The two had failed to appear September 5th in municipal court on charges stemming from this past summer's Ku Klux Klan march into Montgomery. Livingston had posted more than $2,000 in bond money, which was forfeited when the pair didn't show up. Livingston believes the Hubbards aren't Klan members, as some earlier reports indicated, just Klan sympathizers. Mississippi officials continue their probe into the shooting, while Horace, Billy, and Ronald Hubbard are in jail under $50,000 bond each, charged with murder and attempted murder. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
And he's our leading rebounder. He's our leading scorer. Among that, you know, he really plays hard and sets a good example, you know, of how you should work in practice. And as I said, he means a heck of a lot to our team and the success of our team.
It should be no surprise who Coach James Oliver is referring to. He wears number 44, averages more than 22 points per game, and pulls down more than 7 rebounds. His name is Kevin Loader, and he is rapidly developing into one of the premier forwards in Alabama.
I'm not completely satisfied with my performance. I feel I can always improve, and I work hard each day in trying to become a better all-around player. And well, this year it's been my best year so far, but I'm still looking for improvement.
Does he have a career in pro ball?
Yes, he does. He's on the list right now. You know, he'll next year, after he improves and do some things much better than he does now, he should be a high draft choice.
Where do you go from here?
To the top. Still working hard, improving. No one gets to the point where, especially in basketball, where you just get too good for the game. You can always improve.
If Mr. Loader keeps improving and Alabama State keeps winning, a national championship could result. And wouldn't that be a nice way to end the season? Fred Albers, WSFA TV Sports.
Planting intentions for wheat, soybeans, and sorghum are up, while oat and cotton intentions are down slightly. Corn is unchanged. If farmers stick to their predictions, they'll plant 2,400,000 acres of soybeans this year, which is up 4% over last year's figures.
Soybeans has been good to Alabama farmers, and they're continuing their upswing in acreage. They've increased over the past years and continue to increase, which is partially offset by the decrease in the cotton acreage, which has continued to decline over the past years.
Predicted sorghum yields are up 21%. Farmers say they plan to plant 28,000 additional acres this year. Wheat is also up by 43%. Alabama's figures are above the national average in every category except corn, which is 4% higher than the state level. These figures were issued before the grain embargo to Russia, and Alabama farmers could change their minds by the next prediction report in April. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
It wasn't the homes in the Highland Garden subdivision of Montgomery that the burglars were interested in. It was the churches, 3 of them. Highland Gardens Baptist Church on Johnson Street and Highland Gardens Church of Christ on Miller Street are within 2 blocks of each other. Capitol Heights United Methodist Church on Winona Avenue is just a mile away. It's not known what was taken from the churches, but because of the similarities surrounding each incident, authorities believe one person or the same group of people committed all 3 burglaries. The cases are still under investigation by the Montgomery Police Department. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News.
Reed says it's an absolute lie that any blacks in Alabama are being bought off by the Carter administration. Reed is making reference to a reported statement by Senator Edward Kennedy's nephew, Robert Kennedy Jr., who's in charge of the senator's Alabama campaign. Young Kennedy's comment reportedly said that Reed had a lot of money and was passing it around to muster support for Carter. Reed says this statement amounts to politics at its lowest level. Reed says the crux to the problem is in what he calls the importance attached to an ADC endorsement.
We have long recognized that most politicians first seek to get the Alabama Democratic Conference's support, as Senator Edward Kennedy did. But after failing to get that support, they seek to discredit the organization and its leadership.
Reed says the ADC publicly endorsed President Carter December 15th. Reed says he expects some blacks to vote Republican, but he says the major split in the black vote will come between Carter and Kennedy. Reed says he'll do all he can to get those blacks to vote for Carter. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
43 technical, junior, and community colleges operate in the state of Alabama. The staff of the Commission on Higher Education says the state would save money if these schools were combined into 12 regional community colleges. AIC Executive Director John Porter says some people think the staff plan would create 12 new regulatory boards to run the schools. He says only one is proposed. According to Porter, the state could save a lot of the $8.6 million spent each year on the administrative staff for these schools.
The cost for these 12 districts, as we have estimated it, and this again is only for key administrative personnel, is about $5.5 million. So the net you see there for administrative cost is a proposed saving of $3.3 million, or about 30%.
Porter says even more money could be saved if the schools shared purchasing, transportation, computer services, and registration on a district level. He says the new regulatory board for the system would cost about the same as the current regulation from the State Board of Education. The community college plan is still a staff proposal, and the full commission has not formally considered recommending the changes to the legislature. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
They're not 12 separate.
Necessary to do our job. We at the present time have a 10. We at the present time have a 10% increase pending at the Alabama Public Service Commission. We intend to pursue that increase at the commission, and I believe that our public understands that a 10% increase in rates is not wrong. That inflation rate is even higher than the 10%.
What will that money be used for?
To pay the expenses of providing the service that our public needs.
The Denleys will face trial tomorrow, but there won't be a jury. Circuit Court Judge William Gordon will hear the case. Defense attorney Walter Chandler says the accused couple made that decision.
The ultimate decision rested with them. It was not for me to say. I was only to advise, which I did, and I counseled with them at length as to what the effects of waiver of a trial by jury were. And it was after these discussions and after they thought about it and gave it some, I'm sure, lengthy thought, that they chose individually to waive a jury trial.
If they're convicted of the two charges against them, Johnny and Dorothy Danley could face up to 5 years in prison on each count of child molestation. The trial begins here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock before Circuit Judge William R. Gordon. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery County Courthouse.
Dare dogs, huh? He's a dare dog.
Get your gun. Put it in that truck.
It's your first kill of the season?
This year it is.
Would you say that on the whole, what you've heard, the season has been real good?
From what I've heard, it seems to be, yeah.
Is this the first kill of the season?
First time I've shot this year, right?
Would you say that from what you've heard, the season has been real good, not only in Lowndes County and Montgomery County, but across the state?
I think it has. There's been a lot of people who shot at deer, and we haven't killed as many as we usually do, but there's been a lot of shots at deer.
Sheriff's deputies say David Lee Brown of Farmersville wanted to talk to his estranged wife, Clarabelle, here at their mother's home last night around 6:30. When she refused to come outside, Brown allegedly forced his way inside, fired 4 shots, killing his wife and critically wounding his mother-in-law. Chief Deputy Julius Bennett says his investigation shows Brown allegedly opened fire on the women with a 12-gauge shotgun at close range. Bennett says Brown then left the home, drove to his parents' home where Brown's father accompanied his son as he turned himself in at the county jail. Brown is charged with murder and attempted murder. The site of the shooting lies near the Lowndes-Wilcox County line. Because of that rural setting, rescue units took nearly an hour and a half to reach the scene.
I would say it was a problem in a way because it's so far out from the rescue squad headquarters. One way we could eliminate it if we had a volunteer rescue squad in this area, because we had just only 2 rescue squads in the county, and one is out of Fort Department and one is out of Hayneville. And both of them is about 30 miles from this area. And it takes some time for them to get out here.
Both units are manned by volunteers. 30-year-old David Brown remains in the county jail, while 48-year-old Sarah Ingram, his mother-in-law, is in critical condition in a Selma hospital. Lowndes County officials say their investigation into the shooting is continuing. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News, Lowndes County.
When I think of government, and I think of things that happen in government, I try to look at how many people these actions affect and to what degree. Now, you are the governor of the state of Alabama. That's almost 4 million people.
3.5.
What do you think has been your greatest accomplishment for the people in the last year?
We've got 750 to 800,000 youngsters in our public school system, and 200,000 or so need help with respect to literacy. And I believe with all my heart that a child growing up that doesn't learn to read and write, add and subtract is going to have a hard time making a living when he enters a job market, and he's going to have a hard time being a real adult, a free person. And I think we have, through the testing, the war on illiteracy, and constant work with the state school board and other segments of education, Alabama is becoming once again excited about their public school system on a grassroots level. And I believe a tangible difference will accrue from this effort that was started a year ago and will continue. And I agree with you. So often government talks and it's cosmetic and not substantive. And that is substantive. Another thing that is substantive is what tangible tax dollars have been saved, because that money can be used to improve needed services. Another thing that we're keenly interested in is jobs, such as a preferred city program that's designed to help everybody, in particular to help areas that have high unemployment rates. And those are the fundamentals of society. And if we don't look after those, in my opinion, a lot of the other things that we do may be good, but they really don't help Alabama as a whole. And because they do affect the base, the great majority of the people, those are the things that we're going to concentrate on.
You think Alabama needs a good citizen, then? Good citizens with jobs that are productive and they have the ability?
I think we've got great citizenship, and I think give them that fundamental education and an opportunity to work, I think they'll take advantage of it.
You mentioned the education of individuals, and one little element of the education that has been talked about recently is driver's education. I have been told by Dr. Teague that it's not that the government or that the administration feels that driver's education is not a program that has some merit, but it's purely comes down to money.
The state of Alabama participates on a very high ratio with the counties, I think like 75-25. And I think we're third or fourth in the nation as the federal funds that go into the local school system. We need to change that somewhat. We need more local participation. And we're going to have to set some priorities as to how the state part of it will be set. Driver education is a fine thing. And it's not that Dr. Teague or the state school board or the governor's office is against driver education. We would like to see it made optional for the local school board. But if the state has to make a judgment of where it's going to spend its money for reading, writing, and arithmetic, or for driver education, as good as driver education is, we're going to go with the fundamentals because we think it's more important. If you had to set a priority, our priority would be money for a kindergarten rather than for driver education, as good as that may be. And we're going to have to make a lot of decisions in this country all up and down the line at the time the Tea Party's over. But the fact of the matter is, in these inflationary times, number one, we want to make government as efficient as we possibly can. Then we want to provide the services that are most beneficial to the most people, really beneficial. And we hope to be able to show the legislature and the public that this is being done. Now, if the legislature wants to add additional services or continue those at more money, then they're going to have to come up with more money, and that means taxes.
Johnny and Dorothy Danley stood solemnly before Judge William Gordon as he read the verdict. Guilty on 2 joint charges of molesting their 12-year-old daughter and another juvenile girl. The Montgomery couple sat through nearly 2 hours of testimony before the judge rendered his decision, and for nearly an hour the trial was closed to the public while the juveniles involved in the case took the stand. Today's verdict applies only to 4 of the 12 charges against the Danleys. The other 8 indictments returned by the January session of the grand jury will be heard at a later date. Defense attorney Walter Chandler asked the court to postpone sentencing on the 4 child molestation charges until all of the indictments facing the Danleys are brought to trial. Judge Gordon took the matter under advisement. Chandler also advised the court of intentions to file an appeal to the decision reached today. Appeal bond was set at $10,000 each. However, the Danleys still must post another $20,000 apiece in connection with the other 8 charges. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
From absolutely nowhere. The impossible dream, the asterisk on all these polls just 4 months ago.
With close to 80% of the votes counted, George Bush is leading the Iowa Republican straw vote with 33.3%. Ronald Reagan has 27.8%. Not surprisingly, Bush's Alabama campaign staff is ecstatic with his Iowa victory, especially Ray Scott, his Alabama campaign chairman. Scott says the Iowa win is going to help the Alabama effort.
I think that it'll be easier, in one sense of the word, for us to continue our efforts here in Alabama for George Bush than, let's say, it was for the pioneers that started trying to build on that great reputation of his in Iowa. Simply because we do have the springboard that the Iowa caucus and hopefully New Hampshire and some of the others will give us here in Alabama.
But Scott says the win is not going to change the campaign strategy. The staff will be working just as hard, and he expects the enthusiasm to build as the March primary draws near. Assuming George Bush captures the Republican nomination, Scott predicts Jimmy Carter will get the Democratic nod, setting up what Scott calls
a fantastic race between experience and inexperience, between success and a mess.
Michael Jones, WSFA TV News.
It's going to be a marvelous race, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, sir.
Just before 2 this afternoon, members of the Blue Ribbon Commission, who also happen to be members of the State Board of Education, began arriving at the mansion. As the rain came down, the board members in ones and twos drove into the mansion compound. Arriving with School Superintendent Wayne Teague was Marvin Gold. Gold was critical of the governor's proposed education budget at a recent meeting of the Blue Ribbon Commission in Birmingham. In addition to the commission members, the meeting drew several State Department of Education staff members, as well as the governor's financial advisor, David Bronner, and State Finance Director, John Papanastis. John Hamm, the governor's press secretary, came outside and talked with reporters about the meeting. According to Hamm, the Blue Ribbon Commission requested the meeting with Governor James. He says they'll discuss the education budget and any differences the commission members might have with it. As far as the other officials present at the meeting, Hamm says most of them already had meetings with the governor and would have been talking with him anyway. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the governor's mansion.
I think that political matter was well, really overdrawn, and somehow or another they've managed to get back into the sports scenes again. And I think that politics has absolutely no place in sports, and that's what makes it so aggravating is that we're once again punished for something that politicians are dealing with, and it's something that they don't realize that a lot of hard training and dedication goes into.
Russia's making a move to dominate and to take the whole world. They're now moving, and you think about some foolish sports. What the hell is sports when somebody's going to dominate the world and bomb everybody and make us slaves? You worry about some damn track. Sports ain't nothing. That's trouble in America. You put more emphasis on sports than do a plane crash. More emphasis on sports than do a World War I. What in the devil is sports? Sports ain't nothing.
One of the incidents involved a domestic dispute. The mayor says the police department's investigation shows police did not use excessive force in restraining a person who attacked them.
Our police officers are not out there to be punching bags or be beaten up on. They are instructed, and I will be the first one to say that if they do different from that, we'll take care of the situation. They are not to be beaten up.
The other case is one in which Councilman Donald Watkins says two men's constitutional rights may have been violated. Police stopped and questioned the two men because they fit the description of some men who had just committed a robbery. Falmer says that's standard procedure necessary for police to do their job. Watkins says it's important to remember that in police work, the ends do not always justify the means, and police should be careful not to use excessive force. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
History has been one that has worked against people registering to vote. In a series of federal court decisions and interpretation of people being registered in 3 or 4 counties and voting twice on election day, or people voting at people are voted in a voting machine where one election official will mark the voting list, one will sign it, and one will make the difference and bring in the box. Now those kinds of things do not happen all. Yeah. We can get by on the one we've got, but I would not.
Charles Graddick says his office has made great strides since he took office about a year ago. He says one of his main feats was to help revise some proposed amendments to the new criminal code. One of those amendments would have made it difficult for a homeowner to defend himself from intruders.
It made 2 requirements on the citizen who was asleep in his bed. He, one, had to go out there and first determine if the burglar had a weapon. Secondly, if he made that determination, he then inquired as to whether or not the burglar intended to use it on him.
After talking with legislators, Graddick says they changed the amendment so that a homeowner can use whatever force is necessary to protect himself and his family. Graddick also says he sympathizes with St. Clair residents who don't want a prison in their county, but he says they should at least be glad that the criminals would be locked up. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
We did reorganize.
George Bush surprised just about everyone, except maybe himself, in finishing ahead of Ronald Reagan in the Iowa vote. But Bush is not ready to call himself the front runner.
I'm a great believer in momentum. I'm a great believer in forward motion, and we've got that going. My newfound optimism is almost bordering on euphoria this morning, but not enough to think I'm a front runner. I haven't gotten quite that egotistical or unrealistic. But will I be someday? Sure. Not today.
Bush's Alabama campaign director is Ray Scott of Montgomery. Scott says the Iowa victory will certainly help the Alabama effort, but he doesn't plan any changes in the campaign strategy.
We're not going to change our plan. We're going to get out and we're going to do the tough work, and that's getting the word out to every corner and every crevice of the state of Alabama.
Scott is hoping to pick up a lot of the uncommitted votes for Bush as the enthusiasm builds as the March primary draws closer. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News.
The fuel adjustment figure for February will be 1.22 mils per kilowatt hour, which is lower than the 1.93 mils per kilowatt hour that customers are paying this month. The average customer uses just over 1 kilowatt hour each month, and if you use as much electricity in February as you did in January, then your bill will be only $1 or $2 less. However, temperatures for the past 3 weeks have been more than 15% higher than normal, and the temperatures are expected to be lower during the next month. So despite the lower fuel adjustment rate, some customers could experience slightly higher bills because they used more electricity. Power company officials say their production of electricity has been good. Hydroelectric power is up because of the rainfall amounts. Nuclear power is at full production, and the utilities need to purchase out-of-state power is down. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News. Shortly after 6 tonight, Delta Flight 827 arrived. Waiting in the airport was Brenda Lefevre. She and her husband are sponsoring one of the two Laotian families coming into Alabama.
I think I'm probably as excited as they are. I'm sure they are very excited about finally getting to come after, I think, about 4 or 5 years.
Within a couple of minutes, the two families came in the jetway and were jubilantly met by their sponsors.
Oh, this is your sponsor.
The Lefevres worked in conjunction with the Catholic Social Services in Mobile to bring this family out of a refugee camp in Thailand where they've lived for the past several years. The long journey showed on the faces of the refugees, as did the trauma of resettling in a fast-paced new world. Sponsors and refugees finally got to get acquainted.
Well, really, I'm trying to find out their eating habits. I want to make sure I feed them.
From here, the Lefevres will take the family and put them up in a house with money provided under a resettlement program. From there, the Lefevres will help the family become self-sufficient. During the next several months, the Catholic Social Services and individual sponsors will be bringing in at least 20 more Laotian refugee families. That will amount to nearly 100 more people. All of them will be learning how to speak American and adapt to the American way of life. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News, Danley Field.
School principals in the Montgomery County area will soon receive a copy of this letter. They, in turn, will mail a copy to all parents. The letter explains the new state law requiring immunizations for school children from kindergarten to 12th grade. The new requirement came out of the last session of the state legislature, when the compulsory immunization law was amended to include junior high and high school students. It says all students must be immunized against diphtheria, tetanus, whooping cough, polio, measles, rubella, and mumps. The students are required to turn in an immunization certificate before the end of the school year. Elementary and junior high school students have until May 17th. The senior high deadline is March 8th. County Health Officer Dr. Mary Dura says immunization as well as certification can be obtained from a private physician, the County Health Department, or Maxwell Air Force Base in the case of military dependents. Dr. Dura says junior and senior high students may be immunized at the health department on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 1 to 4 p.m. She says most elementary school-age students have already been immunized, but the few who haven't may also come to the health department on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 1 to 4. All parents should receive a copy of the letter containing more information by January 30th. If not, school board officials say the parents should contact their high school principal. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Well, I think very physical. I think an outstanding defensive team.
I think a team that, with a fast break going, can be awesome offensively at times. They haven't been shooting well, but I think that's on the overall season, but I think in the big games they have played well.
You talked about a very important stat that you've noticed about them as compared to the rest of the team.
Well, they've taken more shots than anybody in the conference, which means that they're rebounding more than anybody in the conference. They're tied, I think, with LSU in rebounding. LSU with Mississippi State, I'm sorry. Those three are right together. Well, I tell you, when you're getting more shots, it doesn't matter what your shooting percentage is. They're pounding the boards, and I think basketball games are always won on the backboard and turnovers.
Well, I think this is the best Auburn team we've seen in some time, Phil, and they return all 5 starters, but I think the key thing is they've got real quality depth, at least through 10 players. I think with the return of Cadage, the depth is something that's a great concern to us because Sonny can play, 10 people of pretty near equal ability.
What do you need to do tonight? What do you need to accomplish to win?
Well, we're going to stay out of foul trouble with key people and not spend fouls. We're going to shoot the basketball well because my guess is Auburn will shoot it well. They're a good shooting team, well-organized team. And we'll have to play with some consistency.
What has your team got to do tonight?
Well, I think we've got to keep them off the board. And I think we got to go down and get a shot. We need to get more shots up and get good shots. And I think if we can do that, and if we can play as strong a defense that we've been playing recently, I think it'll be a close game.
You worried about emotion in this game?
I think I definitely am. We've lost so many games, consecutive games to them, that I think the emotional thing has a tendency to hurt us instead of help us. We get ourselves too high and make critical errors at times. I'm hoping our team approaches this as if they have been undefeated at home this year, as they are.
Two-sided.
The Energy Conference is aimed at providing a first-hand exchange of information between elected officials and energy policymakers. That's the expectation of Tuskegee Mayor Johnny Ford, who will serve as the program moderator. Ford says America must gear itself toward a future self-sufficiency in all areas of energy production: oil, natural gas, hydro, geothermal, nuclear, electric, and solar. He's confident that the president's grain embargo to Russia will help Alabama farmers by taking part in a nationwide gas-a-haul program. Ford adds it's time the country's present energy direction be examined and, if necessary, changed to be responsive to the needs of all Americans, especially the poor and elderly, those hardest hit by higher energy costs. The two-day conference is open to the public. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
The price for a gallon of gasoline in Montgomery can vary as much as 10 cents between stations supplied by the same oil company. The reason for this is that one station may be operated directly by the oil company, and the station down the street may buy gas from a middleman who bought his gas from that company. Every time a gallon of gas is resold, the price goes up as each man takes his profit. You'll find even more variation in gas prices from company to company. And that's because each oil company gets its oil from a different source. And since world oil prices vary, so do wholesale prices for each company. House Speaker Joe McCorkadale favors the proposed 5% gas tax. He says with the present price differences, the consumer would notice very little, if any, difference in gas prices, even with the added tax. He says he doubts very seriously that there would be a price increase, and he says in some cases the tax wouldn't change the price of gas at all. The governor's executive assistant, Don Bryan, says he couldn't begin to predict what the tax would do to prices at the pump. The whole controversy centers around how much a gallon of gas costs before and after taxes. This graph represents a gallon of unleaded gas at a self-serve pump in each of 3 cities. So we wouldn't be comparing apples with oranges. We compared prices at one company's company-operated stations in each city. As you can see, Montgomery's total tax is 1 cent higher than Nashville's, but the retail price is 1 2/10 cents higher. Oil company spokesmen say that small difference could represent differences in transportation costs. But Atlanta's tax is 3 cents higher than Montgomery's, yet the cost of a gallon of gas in Atlanta is only 1.4 cents more. Brian wonders why the price isn't 3 cents higher, and McCorkadale says that difference could mean that the oil companies could absorb an added tax in Alabama. An Alabama Petroleum Council spokesman says oil companies get only 3 to 5 cents profit on each gallon of gas, and it's inconceivable that they could absorb part or all of a 5% tax increase. He explains the discrepancy between Montgomery and Atlanta prices by the difference in competitiveness of markets and transportation costs. Brian says transportation costs don't enter into it because Atlanta and Montgomery are on the same pipeline. But he does say that in the final analysis, the consumer has to decide whether he wants lower taxes or better highways, which could be provided by the proposed 5% added tax. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
This is a simulation of the Earth's atmosphere, a vast fluid in constant motion, generated through millions of calculations by the computing facility at the National Center for Atmospheric Research. This global weather model gives scientists clues to what might result from large-scale changes in the Earth's atmosphere. When airborne carbon dioxide is increased in the model and the Earth warmed, major shifts in climate are indicated. One scientist who hopes this experiment will never be carried out in the atmosphere itself is Dr. William Kellogg.
Almost certainly there'll be a change in the big circulation patterns that we see every time we look at one of your weather maps. And these circulation patterns are what determine the rainfall and the temperature in each region. So while the Earth as a whole becomes warmer, these patterns of rainfall and temperature will shift so that there will be some places that are much warmer, some places that may not warm at all. And I think for agriculture, the important thing is the shift in rainfall. And we have reason to believe that there'll be quite big shifts in the rainfall patterns as we warm up the Earth and change them.
The Earth has been warmer before, says Dr. Kellogg, though for different reasons, and such warmer periods of the past may point to what could occur in the future.
Perhaps the best analogy to a warmer Earth is the one that we find going back 4,000 to 8,000 years ago, when the Earth was a couple of degrees warmer, corresponding to what we would expect early in the next century from the greenhouse effect. And during that period, North Africa was much wetter than it is now. The Sahara Desert was a prairie. And remember reading in your history books about the Fertile Crescent, which is now kind of a desert. Well, it was really fertile in those days. The middle of the U.S. seems to have been drier. What is now the Corn Belt was a prairie, a dry prairie. And later on, after the Earth cooled down, it became forested in what is now the Corn Belt. But in those days, it was drier.
Though Dr. Kellogg is quick to add that these particular examples are not necessarily going to repeat themselves, he and his colleagues are nonetheless convinced that such large regional changes in climate could very well occur unless the decision makers of the world act together to avert them. I'm Dan Atkinson with WeatherBeat.
Most adverse effects due to mixing alcohol and drugs are accidental, but the medical toll is high, including an estimated 2,500 deaths a year and 47,000 emergency room admissions a year. And there's always the possibility of danger in mixing alcohol and any prescribed drug, and great caution should be used in combining alcohol and over-the-counter drugs. One particular over-the-counter drug known to interact adversely with alcohol is Tylenol. When taken with alcohol, Tylenol has the ability to produce severe or even fatal liver damage. If you're wondering if someone can take 2 Tylenols after 2 drinks, the answer isn't that easy. Weight, body metabolism, and tolerance are just a few factors that have to be considered. If you're concerned, you can call the Regional Council on Alcoholism, 262-7401, for more information. Meanwhile, more research is being done on mixing Darvon and alcohol. Both are depressants, and the two combined greatly increase the danger of overdose. In addition, if a person's an alcoholic, he may already have an altered metabolism, which would cause the Darvon to stay in his system longer. There are other dangers for drinkers to look out for. The U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission is cautioning that drinking alcohol and hot water tubbing do not mix well either. According to the Commission, taking a hot bath at water temperatures above the normal body temperature can lead to unconsciousness and subsequently result in drowning. The risk of drowning is significantly increased if a person is drinking alcoholic beverages before or while he's taking a hot tub bath. So drinkers beware. Remember that drinking and drugs, booze, and baths do not mix. Ivy Berman, WSFA TV News.
Between 800 and 1,000 people gathered in the rear parking lot of the Alatex textile plant. Most were plant workers showing support of the president's stand in the Iranian situation and Russian aggression in Afghanistan by waving the American flag in the display of this banner, asking that the hostages be freed. The rally was sponsored by the Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers Union locals and Andalusia Mayor Chalmers Bryant. One union member led the group in a prayer asking for the safe return of the hostages. Others asked those in attendance to rally behind the president and to support his policies.
I know in the last 3 years, President Carter has become a very controversial figure. He has done a lot of things that a lot of us don't like, including me. I have been very vocal in some of the things I have said about him, and no doubt many of you have too. But this is one thing that it seems that Americans all over the United States are together on.
Mayor Bryan also asked those present to pray for the hostages' safety, for guidance for Congress and the president to make the right decisions, and for world peace. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News in Andalusia.
Dr. George Layden. You'll find this on page...
that the legislature several years in higher education. So we're all in this business together. Dr. Teague was detained and he could not come. He may come later. As we understand them, for the providing students an opportunity to acquire for special programs. Back to a draft copy of recommendations that a separate board be created to govern junior. This morning, we have here in the audience most.
The 2-page letter dated January 22nd dealt mostly with investment practices of the state treasurer's office. The governor discussed with Ms. Gunter several ideas he had. In addition, the governor talked about the current controversy between Mrs. Gunter and his own financial advisor, David Bronner. He said, quote, "I regret and apologize for the uncalled-for postscript to David Bronner's memorandum to you. This will not reoccur." He also said, quote, "If I were a legislator, the constitutional final authority for taxpayers' money, I might sponsor legislation requiring that you and David place your desk back to back in the same glass cage in order to ensure thorough and accurate communications, and that the public be allowed to view the goings-on between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. weekdays on the theory that if we in public office are going to act like monkeys, we ought to be treated as such." End quote. I talked to the governor about this letter. He was very sincere about his comments. He said that he probably wouldn't be engaged in such letter writing anymore because he said he feels it's really time for government officials to quit monkeying around and get back to the business of government. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
McClendon told the court that he had intended to use the 600-acre tract of land as a park long before the state announced its intentions to build a maximum security prison on the same piece of land. McClendon, however, said that he had not actively gotten his plans underway until after the state announced its intentions. McClendon did tell the court that he had originally intended to wait 2 or 3 years before announcing those plans. McClendon told the court also that he was not aware that a group called Citizens for a Better St. Clair County had announced their intent as being to rid the county of an unwanted jail. However, McClendon did tell the court that he had pledged $10,000 to that group to apply toward purchasing the land. He also gave them $1,000 in cash to apply toward legal fees. McClendon also testified that the county had no money as of September 30th, 1979, with which to buy the land. They would instead be totally dependent on pledges from private citizens, pledges that McClendon had collected. The defense called 5 witnesses in its attempt to prove that the county had for a long time considered that land for a park. He called 5 witnesses, among them 2 St. Clair County commissioners, 1 retired forest ranger from St. Clair County, and a woman who used to own that land, all of them saying they had for a long time thought about using the land for a park. The testimony will continue tomorrow, where Judge Varner will continue listening to testimony and ultimately decide whether the county's move was motivated by the anxieties of a possible prison or the want to develop a park. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Federal Courthouse.
3 issues in the governor's budget that we very strongly disagree with. The first is his cutback for the budget of the Department of Pensions and Security. Last year, this program... Well, I think the answer to the problem is some creative leadership about revenue. The biggest source of revenue that we could tap in this state is virtually untapped, and that's property taxes. This administration has got to raise property taxes from large landowners in this state.
The Alabama Road Builders Association was a receptive audience to McCorkadale's speech on the necessity for a gasoline tax. He says each year the Highway Department's problems have increased along with the state's financial troubles.
We've been talking about a highway program now for some time, and we're almost being preempted by the problem in our Medicaid system. You can procrastinate, as we have for a long time, with the highway program and get by. Of course, we're, as we normally term it, to the leak log on Medicaid now because it will not allow a lot of procrastination.
McCorkadale also passed out copies of gasoline prices in 4 southern cities. He says the charts show that Montgomery's prices are higher than other cities, while its taxes are lower. McCorkadale says he got his figures from a random sampling, a method oil company spokesmen have claimed is inaccurate. McCorkadale says he can't comprehend all the different formulas people use. All he knows is what gas is costing people. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News.
Making a little survey.
Consumer prices rose 1.2% in December. That means items you paid $1 for in 1967 cost you nearly $2.30 at the end of 1979. Most of the increase can be attributed to housing and energy fuel transportation costs. These account for almost 3/4 of the total increase. But according to the Farm Bureau's Market Basket Survey, food prices are down slightly this month. Alabamians are paying 0.4% less than last month. Lower prices can be seen in beef and pork products. This month, T-bone steak is an especially good buy. Steaks are down almost 22 cents per pound. Pork chops are down 9 cents per pound. There's also a slight decline in the price of eggs, tomatoes, and lettuce. Most increases can be found in poultry and milk products. Director of the Food Price Survey, Dick Fifield, says he's noticed over the past 5 years a slight decline in the food prices in the month of January.
I don't think there's any doubt that we're going to see higher prices because the cost of off-the-farm labor and processing have gone up astronomically. The farmer's only getting some 30% of the consumer's food dollar right now.
One question most people are asking is what effect the Russian grain embargo will have on food prices. Fifield says the embargo will have little effect on consumer prices because of governmental support of farm prices. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Governor James's attorney, Rod Nachman, called as his first 2 witnesses newspaper reporters, one from Montgomery and one from St. Clair County. Both attested to the validity of quotes they printed in their newspapers in which St. Clair County Commission Chairman James McClendon essentially said he would take whatever legal steps necessary to stop that prison from coming to St. Clair County. This is James McClendon. Yesterday he had testified that blocking the prison was not his motive. Some of the most damaging testimony came from St. Clair County Commissioner James Ingram, who testified that he had had a conversation with County Commission Chairman McClendon in which McClendon said he would take it to court in an effort to keep it tied up as long as possible, hoping the state would look elsewhere. Judge Varner reminded attorneys for both sides not to take any steps until he ruled in the matter, and that, he said, would come very soon. Then he reminded all of the attorneys that he had a responsibility to make sure that no one interfered with what he has told Governor James, as receiver of the prison systems, to do. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Federal Courthouse.
Advanced engineering and design work for the Coosa River portion of the project have been underway for about 15 months. Waterway President Chris Hines told association members that once the work on the waterway is complete, waterborne commerce will mean a boom to the state's economy.
In my opinion, it'll be the greatest thing we've ever had in Alabama. It will enable the people in Alabama to ship things all over the world through the Port of Mobile.
Hines says a survey of the river project will take top priority this year, and if all goes well, construction should start by 1983. The group also took time out today to honor one of the men they say is responsible for their navigation project becoming a reality. He's 4th District Congressman Tom Bevel, who's been instrumental in introducing legislation to fund the Coosa River program. Sydney Kohara, WSFA TV News at the Montgomery Civic Center.
Well, basically what we're trying to do is get together most of the black leadership, political leadership in the state of Alabama, together in a unified effort to do some statewide strategy in organizing an effort to get the president reelected, of course. There are several factions here in terms of black politics in Alabama, and what we're trying to do is to, like I say, pull them all together in a unified effort so that we can make everybody's position and effort a little easier for the work that we're doing.
Those recruiters I talked to say they haven't noticed any change in the number of people signing up, but a few say they're receiving more phone calls than usual from people asking questions about registration requirements.
Well, we've had concerned parents calling, and we've had young men and young ladies calling, wanting to know just what is going on. And of course, we have to tell them the same thing, that just what was heard over the radio and when the president gave a speech on TV. People are getting misconstrued on it. The president said he's going to start the registration, which is a whole lot different than the draft, so we're just going on that assumption.
Sergeant Kaler says most of the calls are from women wanting to know if they'll have to register. Others ask questions ranging from what age group will be subject to the draft to when do we have to register. And of course, there are always questions from those wanting to know who will be exempt from service. All the recruiters I talked with say they're still in the dark about registration procedures. Like other recruiters, Sergeant Kaler says he is now giving out the number to the Selective Service Agency. Anyone with questions should call area code 202-724-0797. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
The Alabama director of the Emergency Land Fund, Harold Gaines, says a lack of education about the situation is primarily responsible for the declining number of black landowners, many of whom are small farmers. At the National Association of Landowners State Convention in Montgomery, Gaines and other officials met to discuss ways to help the small property owner. Senator Donald Stewart told the crowd senators from urban areas are blocking legislation that could help rural areas. He also pointed out rising energy costs are hurting all farmers, not just black farmers.
Senator Herman Talmadge and I introduced the Rural Energy Independence Act. And that'll give people, if we work it right, the capability on the farms and in the rural communities of this country, and I hope to goodness in Alabama, have the capability to produce their own fuel.
State Director of the Emergency Land Fund, Harold Gaines, says small landowners should familiarize themselves with the law concerning loans, foreclosures, and most importantly, the use of wills. Gaines says if no heir is left in charge of the parcel of land by a deceased family member through a will, virtually any member of the family or even their children can sell the land because all collectively are entitled to the property. Paul Roth, WSFA TV News.
This exercise is very important to the combat readiness of the 187th. The exercise at Nellis Air Force Base closely simulates the combat conditions that this unit would face in an actual war situation. Even though we're not at war, they simulate the conditions, and it increases the readiness of our individuals and helps them in their training and provides a better opportunity to survive in a real war.
We know that there is an invitation from the citizens of Alabama to have the President come on March 1st. No decision has been made, to my knowledge, on whether or not the President will be able to come. As you well know, the international crises are such that the President's time has to be spent in dealing with those crises. So we don't know just how much politicking he's going to be able to do from Washington.
Well, I think he highlighted the problems in the foreign policy and defense area that ought to be highlighted. We need to beef up our conventional troop strength, our capability in that area. There's no question that this country needs to counter the Soviet moves in Afghanistan. I think the President is moving in the right direction in that situation. I agree with him on Iran, but I just don't think he's done what he should have done quickly enough. The things that he has done, I think, might perhaps in the long run prove successful, but I think the administration should have recognized that some of the efforts that they were making were not going to prove to be successful and should have moved a little more quickly in that area.
McCorkadale says the Highway Department feels the pinch and problems of inflation more than any other state agencies. He says those problems can be seen in the high cost of supplies, equipment, personnel, and other related areas.
Other than the Highway Department, we've got to have some money there. I see no reason and no purpose in looking at new revenue measures or new taxes unless more justification or accountability can be shown for the increases that we have each year. Maybe this can be shown. If so, we'll take another look at it.
McCorkadale says although there are sufficient funds in other state departments, that is not the case with the Highway Department. He says the Highway Department needs more money this year. Otherwise, he says politics will stop legislators from voting for any new tax in the 1982 election. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Thank you.